So you remember Humane, that AI pen company that kind of got a lot of criticism when it launched? They are out with something called Cosmos, like COSMOS, right? It's an operating system for AI that is not just going to be for their devices, but that they hope can be run on other devices as well. Basically, I guess is kind of about turning everything into a Humane pin in a way. Now, I don't know if this is going to resurrect Humane's image among certain people. Of course, the co-founders came from Apple, so there's sort of a connection there for a lot of people watching this content. But I guess if you kind of want a chill Jarvis sort of AI that works across all your devices, that's kind of what they're trying to develop for people here. What I do know is people seem very divided on this. There's still people who really are laughing about this, although some people definitely see the potential. You have both camps, right? I'm just talking about the actual pin itself, not Cosmos. What I think a lot of people don't understand about AI is A, it's not neutral, right? Somebody at the company bakes in their worldview, essentially. They choose to contextualize, how things are presented. The data that's trained, that the AI is trained on, that is chosen as well. And just there's so many different ways that AI isn't neutral. So there's going to be this big battle for like whose AI becomes most important in everybody's lives. And what they're wanting to do here is like make everything from your car to whatever could run AI use Cosmos, right? So you're not just buying into like quote unquote a Jarvis sort of system like you might see in the movies, right? Or like the Star Trek computer from back in the day. You're buying into an entire way of perceiving and dealing with the world. That said, if it could make your home feel smarter, if it could make your car feel smarter, maybe there's a side where people are like, yeah, I wish that it wasn't just a Siri and an Alexa and a Google Assistant and like all these different disparate things. I wish it was just like an AI assistant for myself. That's what Cosmos is shooting for. In other words, they want an AI that can manage your life across multiple devices. That's the sort of wild idea here. And obviously, from a tech perspective, that could make a lot of sense. But there's a perspective where it's like, isn't this just Google Assistant but more complicated? I could see some people thinking that. But weirdly enough, whether Humane is the right company to do this or whether consumers end up actually wanting this or not, obviously the potential for technology to maybe do things like discern what you might want ahead of time and serve that up to you, like go beyond just like you having to proactively, instruct it or tell it things, but for it to just sort of surface at the right time or even right before, the right time, things that you might find useful or helpful, that could feel like a game changer. And if you didn't have to context switch from this AI to that AI, right, and sort of piecemeal something together, I think like it's a smart play probably from Humane, to go after this. Someone's going to go after this and someone's probably going to try to nail it. And at the end of the day, probably my guess would be that, several years in the future, it'll kind of come down to your ecosystem that you're already in. Like if Apple ever finally nails AI, then maybe you will have this sort of thing for people in the Apple ecosystem, this sort of thing for people in the Google ecosystem or the Windows world or whatever. That's just a guess though. Because if you have all these devices, whether your iPhone, Android, whatever it is, Windows, Mac, whatever, if you have all those devices and then you have something outside of that ecosystem, right, that's trying to be the meta layer that wraps around all of that, that's a big ask. That's hard to do, and this is the kind of thing where if Apple were to do this sort of initiative and actually really nailed their AI strategy, they can integrate stuff at the system level, at the ecosystem level that somebody from the outside can't, that an app developer, for instance, can't, or a third-party hardware developer just can't. It's the kind of idea that could have a pretty big impact on how people live, I guess. But did you know that some people are betting on this to be the next big thing in home automation? I think that there are times when something looks crazy or seems crazy and pays off in a big way, and the early adopters, whether it's the founders or investors or the actual users that adopt something early, are, like, I told you so. And then there are other times where it's like people see from the beginning that something was just never meant to be, and no matter how hard the company tries to make it happen or make it a thing, it's just not going to work. or where they have to make a huge pivot, which is sort of like what we might be seeing here from Humane. Really curious what you think about this. Is this a laughing stock to you? You know, the Humane pin, do you just not get it? Is this whole CosmOS thing like a non-announcement to you? It's like, you know, too out there, too overly complicated. Like it's not solving a problem that you felt like you had. It's trying to sell you on something that maybe you didn't feel like you needed. I guess the question is this to you an AI gimmick, or is it Humane's we can do better moment? Like, let us show you. Tell me what you think. Really, I'm struggling to think like, why couldn't Apple Watch do a lot of this stuff?